in the great vault of the Sordan Dominion's war council, where the ceiling was carved to resemble the throat of a conquered god, the map of the Orion Fringe hung in the air like a wound waiting to be cauterized. 9,000 years of conquest had taught the Dominion many things, and the greatest of these was patience. They did not rush. They did not fear. They arrived, and worlds learned the shape of their own smallness. Warlord Suthek Vorkal stood before the map with his 4 arms folded, each hand resting on the elbow of the arm above it, in the posture the Sordan reserved for boredom. He was old in the way mountains are old, and his hide had gone the gray of ancient stone. Around him, the lesser lords of the council waited, their gill slits fluttering with the small anxieties of those who wish to seem useful. "The humans," said Lord Iskavar, gesturing at a cluster of pale motes near the edge of the map, "have declined the terms of tribute, a 3rd time." The map showed the human sphere as a thin, ragged smear along the fringe, a scattering of colony worlds and mining stations strung together by shipping lanes that looked, to Sordan eyes, like the tracks a wounded animal leaves in snow. Small, disorganized, a civilization that had crawled off its cradle world only a few centuries past and had not yet learned to be afraid of the dark. "Then they have declined to survive," Vorkal said. His voice was the low grind of tectonic plates. "Show me their strength." Iskavar's antennae drooped. It was never wise to bring the warlord numbers that would displease him, but it was worse to bring him none. The human military is fragmented across 7 fleets, none larger than a Sordan escort squadron. Their capital vessels are undergunned. Their doctrine is defensive, and along the fringe itself, where our advance will fall first, they maintain nothing but a scattering of patrol craft, small ships, crews of a dozen or fewer. They call them cutters or wardens, or, he consulted the glyphs floating beside the map, patrol boats. A ripple of amusement moved through the council, the Sordan equivalent of laughter, a wet clicking deep in a dozen throats. "Patrol boats," Vorkal repeated, and the words seemed to amuse even him. He crossed the chamber and touched the smallest of the motes, a single point of light drifting alone near a gas giant called, in the human tongue, Halcyon's Reach. "This is what stands between us and their worlds, not a fleet, not a fortress, a rowboat with an engine crewed by children who have never seen a real war." "They fought the Ketan," offered a younger lord unwisely. "The Ketan were vermin with rifles," Vorkal said without turning. "We are the Dominion. There is a difference between a people who have never been truly conquered and a people who have simply never been noticed. The humans are the latter. They believe their distance is a wall. They will learn it is only a longer walk to the grave." He drew back his hand, and the little mote of light went on drifting unaware. "Send the 9th Vanguard to the fringe. Let them break the patrol line at Halcyon's Reach and open the road. I want the humans to understand, by the time their government finds the courage to answer, that the war was over before they knew it had begun." The council clicked its approval. The map turned, slow and vast, and the small pale motes of the human sphere hung in the dark like dust, waiting to be swept away. None of them looked twice at the patrol boat drifting near the gas giant. Why would they? It was the smallest thing on the map. Its name was the Grayling. The Grayling was 210 meters of hull that had been patched, rewelded, and repatched so many times that her original paint survived only in the crew compartments, where no vacuum could scour it away. She was a Warden-class patrol boat, which was the Terran Frontier Authority's polite term for a warship too small to be a warship and too armed to be anything else. She carried 1 spinal railgun, 4 point defense turrets, a rack of torpedoes that had been designed to kill pirates and asteroids, and a crew of 11. She had been in service for 19 years, which made her older than most of the people aboard her. She was also, at that particular moment, running dark and silent in the shadow of Halcyon's Reach, which was against regulations, and she was doing it on the orders of the youngest commanding officer in the Fringe Patrol. Lieutenant Cade Merrow was 24 years old and had held command of the Grayling for exactly 4 months, which was 3 months longer than anyone at Fringe Station had expected him to last. He was not, by any measure the authority used, an impressive young man. He was lean in the way of someone who forgot to eat when he was thinking. With dark hair he cut himself, and a habit of chewing the inside of his cheek when a problem would not resolve. He had graduated in the middle of his academy class. He had never fired a shot in anger, and he had inherited command of the Grayling not through any brilliance, but because the previous captain had retired, and no one senior had wanted a 19-year-old ship at the far end of the line. What Cade Merrow had instead of a reputation was a bad feeling and the stubbornness to act on it. "Anything?" he asked. Petty Officer Nils Ackafer did not look up from the sensor console. He was the oldest hand aboard at 38, a broad, unhurried man who had served on 4 ships before this one and had a way of making even the young captain feel steadier by not seeming worried. Same as an hour ago. Gravitic ghost coming and going. Could be the gas giant burping. Could be a survey drone with a bad transponder. Could be a ship running dark, Cade said. Could be, Ackafer finally glanced back. You want to call it in? That was the question, and Cade knew what the answer would cost either way. If he called Fringe Station and reported a contact that turned out to be a hiccup in the gas giant's magnetosphere, he would be the green lieutenant who cried wolf, the one who scrambled a response for nothing, and the story would follow him for years. If he didn't call it in, and it was something. He looked at the plot again. The ghost had appeared 4 times in 6 hours, always in the same rough sector, always in the deep gravity shadow where a ship could hide its drive signature against the giant's roar. It was not moving like a natural phenomenon. Natural phenomena did not station keep. No, he said slowly, not yet. If I call it in, whoever's out there hears the transmission and knows we've seen them. Right now they think we're blind. He straightened. I want to know what it is before I tell anyone it's there. Ackafer considered him for a moment, then nodded once, the small nod of a man who had decided the boy might be worth following after all. Then we go take a look. We go take a look, Cade agreed and felt his stomach knot. Quiet as we can. Sill, plot me a drift course. Use the giant's rotation, ride the shadow in. No active thrust unless I call for it. At the helm, Ensign Sela Wren, 19, the youngest aboard, with the reflexes of someone who had grown up racing skiffs through the ring systems of her home world, was already laying it in. Coasting on the gravity gradient. Slow, though. 40 minutes to visual range. Then we've got 40 minutes, Cade said. Everyone eats something. It's going to be a long night. It was, in fact, the beginning of the longest 6 months in the history of the Terran frontier, though not one soul aboard the Grayling knew it yet. They ate their ration bars in the dark, and the little patrol boat crept through the shadow of the gas giant like a diver holding her breath, and ahead of them, wading in the deep, the leading scout of the Sordan 9th Vanguard was doing exactly what the warlord had promised, preparing to open the road. The scout's name, insofar as a Sordan warship had a name, was Tide. That takes. She was 4 times the Grayling's mass and carried weapons that could turn the patrol boat into an expanding cloud of superheated gas in a single volley. Her commander, Submarshal Enkoth, had been given a simple task: hold position, map the human patrol patterns, and confirm the sector was as empty of resistance as the intelligence promised. He had been watching the Grayling's patrol route for 2 days and had concluded, correctly, that the little ship followed a predictable path and that its crew were amateurs. He had not concluded, because it did not occur to him to consider it, that amateurs are unpredictable precisely because they do not know what they are not supposed to do. The Grayling came out of the gas giant's shadow 11 minutes ahead of Enkoth's projection, from a bearing he had not thought to watch, with her sensors passive and her drive cold, and for the space of 3 full seconds the Sordan scout did not see her at all. Cade saw the tide that takes, though. He saw it fill the forward display as the passive optics resolved it out of the dark, A long, ridged hull the color of drowned iron, bristling with weapon housings, its running lights doused, its drive banked. A warship. A real one of a design no human had ever logged, sitting silent in Terran space with every indication that it did not want to be found. The bridge went very quiet. "That's not a survey drone," Sela whispered. "No," Cade said. His mouth had gone dry. Every instinct in him screamed to run, to burn hard for the station, to put distance between his little boat and that iron giant. And that, he understood in a cold flash of clarity, was exactly the wrong thing to do. The moment the Grayling lit her drive, the scout would see her, and a ship that size would have weapons that could reach across the distance between them before the Grayling built up any speed at all. They were inside the reach of its guns. They had been inside its reach since before they'd seen it. Running would only mean dying tired. "Akefir," he said quietly, "how long has it been sitting there?" "Contacts consistent with the ghost. Days, maybe." Days, Cade's mind raced. A warship that had been hiding in Terran space for days, watching the patrol line doused and silent. That was not a raider. Raiders hit and ran. That was a scout. And a scout meant there was something behind it that needed scouting for. "It's the tip of something," he said, half to himself. "It's the front of a bigger movement." He looked at the iron hull filling his screen, and for one vertiginous moment the whole shape of it opened up in his mind. The War Council he could not see, the fleet he did not yet know existed, the casual certainty of an enemy who had already decided the outcome. "They're going to come through here. They're going to come through here, and we're the only ones who know." "Then we run and we tell somebody," Sela said, and there was a plea in it. "We can't outrun it." Cade forced his breathing to slow. "The second we light the drive, it fires. We're already close enough to touch." He chewed the inside of his cheek, and the problem turned over and over in his head, and slowly, terribly, an answer began to form, not a good answer, not a safe one, but the only one the situation allowed. "But it doesn't know we've seen it. Right now it thinks it's still hidden. It thinks we drifted out here by accident and we're going to drift right past." Akefir's voice was very careful. "What are you thinking, Lieutenant?" Cade Merrow looked at the warship that could kill his entire crew in a single breath, and made the first of the decisions that would, in time, teach 9,000 years of empire to be afraid. "I'm thinking," he said, "that if we can't run and we can't fight, then the only thing left is to make it flinch first. Nils, I want a firing solution on its drive cluster, not to fire, just to lock. Sela, hands on the helm, but do not move us. Comms, open a channel. Wide band, their most common trade frequency. I'm going to talk to it." "Talk to it?" Sela stared at him. "Sir, we don't even know what it is." "That's why I'm going to talk to it." He wiped his palms on his trousers. "Whoever's in there has been very, very careful not to be seen. That means they're not ready to be seen. That means being seen scares them more than it scares us. So we're going to see them. Loudly." The channel opened with a soft tone. Cade stared into the optical pickup, at the iron hull that did not yet know its long silence was about to end, and he kept his voice level, and young, and absolutely steady. "Unidentified vessel," he said. "This is the Terran patrol ship Grayling. You are holding position in restricted frontier space without transponder or clearance. I have a firing solution on your primary drive cluster and 11 torpedoes in the tubes. You will identify yourself and state your intentions, or I will assume them, and I will act accordingly. You have 30 seconds. He closed the channel before his voice could shake, and in the silence that followed, Ensign Sela Wren turned to look at her 24-year-old captain as though she had never seen him before. Aboard the tide that takes, Submarshal Enkoth received the transmission and went, for a moment, completely still. He had been discovered. That was bad, but it was survivable. The little ship was no threat, and he could destroy it before it finished a single evasive turn. What stopped him, what held 4 hands frozen above the firing controls for one crucial second, was the tone. The human had not panicked. The human had not fled. The human had spoken to a Sordan warship, a thing that could unmake it utterly, in the flat, bored, unhurried voice of a customs officer who had all the time in the world. And Enkoth, who had spent 2 days concluding that the humans were amateurs, felt the first cold thread of a doubt he could not name. Either the human did not understand what it was facing, or it understood something Enkoth did not. He did not know which frightened him more. 30 seconds is a long time to wait for a warship to decide whether to kill you. On the bridge of the Grayling, no one spoke. HFY kept the firing solution locked, though every man aboard knew that a spread of pirate-killing torpedoes against a hull like that was a stone thrown at an avalanche. Sela kept her hands on the helm and did not move the ship. Cade counted in his head, slow and even, and watched the iron giant for the flare of opening weapon ports that would mean he had guessed wrong and killed them all. At 22 seconds, the channel chimed. The voice that came through was deep and layered, as though several throats spoke at once, and the translator gave it a flat, clicking cadence. "Small ship, you do not know what you have found." "Then tell me," Cade said. "You've got 20 seconds left." A pause. "I am Submarshal Enkoth of the Sordan Dominion. You are a patrol boat. You have 1 gun and a handful of torpedoes that would not scratch my hull. Your threat is meaningless. I could end you before your captain finished a single word." Another pause, and something shifted in the layered voice, not quite curiosity but close to it. "Why are you not afraid?" Cade let the silence stretch, because he had learned in 24 years of being underestimated that a well-placed silence does more work than any answer. When he spoke slowly. "Because you're hiding, Submarshal. A ship that could end me in a breath doesn't sit doused and silent in someone else's space for 2 days. You're a scout. You're here to look, not to fight, and you weren't supposed to be found. Which means the moment you fire on me, you announce to my entire government that the Sordan Dominion has warships inside the Terran frontier. You lose the one thing you came here to keep, surprise." He leaned toward the pickup. "So here's where we are. You can kill me and lose your war before it starts. Or you can leave right now and I can pretend I drifted out here by accident and saw nothing. Those are your options. I'd think fast. My torpedoes don't get bored." The channel went silent again, and this time the silence had a different quality, the quality of an old and powerful thing recalculating. Submarshal Enkoth stared at the plot of the little human ship and felt the ground of his certainty shift beneath him. The human was right. That was the intolerable thing. The human, a child in a rowboat, had in the space of a minute reasoned out the entire strategic shape of the 9th Vanguard's operation from a single doused hull, had understood that a scout's power lies in secrecy, and that secrecy, once spent, cannot be bought back. To fire now would be to trade the whole advantage of the coming offensive for the satisfaction of swatting an insect. Vorkal would have his hide for it. But to leave, to be dismissed, to be given permission to depart by a human patrol boat, was a humiliation Enkoth could taste. "You presume a great deal," he said, "for something so small." "I presume you'd rather win than feel good," Cade answered. 15 seconds. And Submarshal Enkoth, ancient and armored and outgunning the Grayling 40 times over, did the arithmetic a second time, hated the answer a second time, and lit his drive. The tide that takes turned in the dark, ponderous and enormous, and slid away toward the deep black beyond the fringe, and the little patrol boat let it go, torpedo tubes still hot, and did not fire a single shot. When the scout's drive signature had faded past detection, Ensign Sela Wren let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for a full minute, and put her face in her hands, and laughed the shaky, near-hysterical laugh of someone who has just watched a coin land on its edge. "We let it go," she said. "We had it locked and we let it go." "We couldn't kill it," Cade said. His hands were trembling now that they no longer had to be still, and he pressed them flat against the console so no one would see. "If I'd fired, they'd have known we were tracking their whole operation. As long as it thinks we might not have understood what we saw, they have to move slower. They have to wonder how much we know." He made himself breathe. And now we call it in. Now the whole frontier knows a Sordan vanguard is massing beyond Halcyon's reach. That's worth more than one dead scout. Akafar was looking at him with an expression the young captain couldn't quite read. You bluffed a Dominion warship into retreat, the older man said slowly, with a threat you couldn't back up, on the theory that its secrecy was worth more than our lives. Was I wrong? No, Akafar said. That's what's bothering me. He almost smiled. You want to be careful, Lieutenant. A man who's right when he shouldn't be tends to get asked to do it again. The report the Grayling transmitted to Fringe Station that night changed everything, though it took some time for anyone above Cade Merrow's pay grade to admit it. A confirmed Sordan military presence inside the frontier, a Dominion no human government had ever formally contacted, whose reputation reached the Terran sphere only as rumor, a name spoken by frightened traders from the deeper stars. Command scrambled. Fleets that had been scattered across 7 sectors began, slowly, to converge. And at the center of the sudden storm of activity was a single line in the incident report that a records clerk at Fringe Station read 3 times before she believed it. Patrol boat Grayling engaged and turned back a Sordan capital scout without firing. The clerk told a friend, the friend told a wardroom. And so the first thread of a story began to travel the frontier, ahead of the war, ahead of the fleets, faster than any warship. The story of a little patrol boat that had stared down a Dominion warship and made it blink. It would have died there, a curiosity, a single strange night, if the 9th Vanguard had gone home. It did not go home. Warlord Vorkal, when the report reached him, did not rage. Rage was for lesser lords. He listened to Enkoth's account in the great vault beneath the carved god's throat, and when the sub-marshal had finished explaining, with as much dignity as he could gather, how he had chosen strategic patience over the destruction of a patrol boat, the warlord was silent for a long time. You were correct, Vorkal said at last, and Enkoth's relief lasted exactly until the warlord continued. The secrecy was worth more than the kill. Your reasoning was sound, and that is what troubles me, because it was not your reasoning that reached that conclusion first. It was the humans. He rose from the seat of stone. A patrol officer, a child in a ship not worth the fuel to destroy it, understood the strategic value of your silence faster than you did, and used it against you. He looked at the map, at the little smear of human worlds, and for the first time in a very long time, the warlord of the Sordan Dominion felt something he did not have a comfortable name for. The offensive proceeds, but I want to know who commands that ship. I want to know the name. 2 weeks later, the war came to the Fringe in earnest, and the name the warlord had asked for began to make itself known. The 9th Vanguard did not come as a single fist. It came as a slow tide, a dozen probing thrusts along 1,000 light-years of frontier, testing where the human line was thin. And it was thin everywhere. The Terran fleets were still converging, still days and weeks from concentration, and in the meantime the only thing between the Dominion's probes and the colony worlds was the patrol line, the cutters and wardens and little patrol boats that Vorkal had dismissed as rowboats. They were rowboats, but they were rowboats crewed by people defending their own homes, and that, the Dominion would learn, is a different kind of arithmetic. The Grayling drew the sector around Halcyon's reach, which meant she drew the tip of the same thrust her captain had already scouted. And so it was that 11 days into the war, Cade Merrow found himself with 3 patrol boats under his loose command, his own Grayling, the Sable Wren, and the Tallow, facing a Sordan raiding element of 2 corvettes, and a light cruiser bearing down on the mining colony at Halcyon's third moon, where 4,000 human civilians were being loaded, too slowly, onto evacuation transports. 3 patrol boats against 3 warships, and every warship bigger than all 3 patrol boats combined. "We can't beat them," said Lieutenant Vasquez of the Sable Wren, over the encrypted link. She was older than Cade and had more experience and had deferred command to him for exactly one reason. The Grayling had already faced a Sordan ship and lived. We can slow them, buy the transport's time. That's the mission. That's the mission, Cade agreed. But he was looking at the plot, at the geometry of the moon and its debris ring and the ragged old cometary belt that swept past it, and the same cold clarity was coming over him that had come in the shadow of the gas giant, the sense of a problem turning over and over until a hidden face came into view. But I don't want to trade 3 boats for 20 minutes. I want to hurt them. If we hurt them badly enough, they don't push the next colony. They wait. They call for more. And every day they wait is a day the fleets get closer. With what, Merrow? We don't have the guns. No, Cade said, but we've got the ground. He highlighted the cometary belt on the shared plot, a slow river of ice and rock and dust sweeping past the moon at 11 kilometers a second. They're going to come in on a least time approach to the colony, straight and fast, because they think we'll run and they don't want to give the transports time. They'll come through here. He traced the line. Right along the edge of the belt. Big ships. Good sensors, but sensors that are calibrated for open space, not for looking through a river of ice. He laid out the plan in the flat, unhurried voice that his crew was beginning to recognize as the voice he used when he was frightened, and had decided not to be. The 2 corvettes and the cruiser would come in fast and confident. The 3 patrol boats would not meet them in the open, where they would die. They would go into the cometary belt, into the slow, tumbling chaos of ice and rock where a big ship's sensors drowned in clutter and a small ship, running dark and cold, could hide in the noise. They would let the Sordan pass. And then they would come out of the belt behind them, out of the one bearing the enemy's sensors were worst at watching, and put torpedoes into their drive clusters at a range too short to miss. It's insane, Vasquez said. There was a long pause. It might work. It'll work if we're patient, Cade said, and if nobody fires early. That's the whole game. We let them go past us. We let them get close enough to the colony that they're committed, that they're thinking about the kill and not about their own backs. And then we take their engines. He paused. We're not here to trade shots with warships. We're here to be the thing in the dark they didn't check for. The 3 little ships slid into the cometary belt, while the Sordan element was still hours out, and they shut down everything that could be shut down. Drives banked to a whisper, active sensors, dark life support cut to a cold minimum until the crews could see their own breath. They tucked themselves into the lee of tumbling ice mountains and matched the belt's slow drift and waited, 3 specks in a river of 1 billion specks, and the cold crept into the hulls, and the crews shivered in the dark and watched the plot on passive optics and did not make a sound. Aboard the Grayling, Sela Wren whispered, "How long?" "As long as it takes," Cade whispered back. "They come to us. We do not go to them." He watched the 3 Sordan warships resolve out of the dark, huge and confident, running fast and straight on a least time line to the colony, exactly where he had said they would be, along the edge of the belt, their sensors washed gray by the clutter. Steady, steady, nobody moves. The corvettes passed within 4,000 kilometers of the Grayling's hiding place and did not see her. The cruiser passed behind them, vast and ridged, its weapon housings already tracking toward the distant colony and the crawling transports. And Cade Merrow, 24 years old, cold to the bone, watched the drive clusters of 3 Dominion warships slide past his darkened bridge and let them go, and let them go, and let them go, until they had passed, until their vulnerable sterns were turned toward the belt, until the range was so short that his old pirate-killing torpedoes could not miss. "Now," he said, and the river of ice opened, and 3 patrol boats came out of the dark where nothing was supposed to be, drives flaring hot, tubes already firing. The torpedoes crossed the short gap in seconds, and because the Sordan ships had turned their backs to the belt, because their captains had been thinking about the kill and not about their own drives, the point defense grids never got the chance to fully wake. The first corvette lost its entire drive cluster in a blossom of white fire and went tumbling, powerless, into the belt it had just passed through, where an ice mountain the size of a city finished what the torpedoes had begun. The second corvette, faster to react, managed to kill 2 of the incoming torpedoes and rolled to bring its guns around, and took the third and fourth in its exposed flank, and lost thrust, and drifted, venting atmosphere and burning from the inside. The cruiser survived. Cade had known it would. It was too big, its point defense too dense, and it killed 6 of the torpedoes meant for it and shrugged off the 2 that struck. But its captain, in the space of 30 seconds, had watched 2 escorts die at the hands of ships that had come out of empty space, and the confident least time run to the colony had become something else entirely. A big ship, alone, deep inside a debris field, with an enemy of unknown strength somewhere in the clutter behind it. The cruiser broke off. It turned from the colony, lit its drive to full and ran for open space, and the 3 patrol boats did not chase it, because chasing it would have meant dying, and Cade Merrow had not come to die. He had come to make the Dominion wait, and the Dominion waited. The colony at Halcyon's third moon finished its evacuation without losing a single transport. 4,000 civilians who had expected to die in the next hour instead watched the Sordan cruiser flee into the dark, and they did not know the name of the young officer who had bought their lives, but the crews of the transports did, and the transport crews talked, the way people talk, and the story grew. It was what the Grayling did next that made it grow faster. The second corvette, the one that had drifted, burning and venting into the edge of the belt, was not dead. Its drive was gone and its hull was breached in a dozen places, but a third of its crew still lived, sealed into compartments that were slowly losing air, and the Sordan had no ship near enough to reach them for 2 days. By every law of war Cade Merrow had been taught, the correct thing to do was to leave them. They were the enemy. They had come to burn a human colony. A drifting wreck full of dying Sordan was a problem that would solve itself. Cade brought the Grayling alongside it instead. "Sir," said Akafer, and there was no argument in it, only a question. "What are we doing?" "I'm not sure yet," Cade admitted. He was looking at the wreck on the display, at the puffs of freezing atmosphere venting from its wounds, at the flicker of emergency lights still burning inside a hull that had, an hour ago, been trying to kill 4,000 people. "They came here to murder a colony. I know that." He was quiet a moment. "But they're not murdering anyone now. Now they're just people freezing in the dark, and I've got a working airlock and a medical bay, and I have to decide what kind of thing we are while nobody's watching. That's the only time it counts." He opened a channel to the wreck. It took a long time for anyone to answer, and when a voice finally came, it was thin and layered and afraid, and the translator gave it the flat click of the Sordan tongue. "Human ship, you have come to finish us." "No," Cade said. "I've come to take off your wounded. I've got room for 40. My medical officer will treat them the same as she'd treat my own. When your fleet comes for the rest, I'll leave the wreck's beacon active so they can find it. You have my word." He paused. "I need your commander to order your point defense grids cold before I bring my people across. If a single turret so much as twitches, we're gone and you freeze. Do we understand each other?" There was a long silence on the channel, the silence of a proud thing trying to comprehend an offer it had no framework for. "Why?" the Sordan voice said at last. "You do not know us. We came to kill your people. Why would you spend your air, your medicine, your risk on your enemy?" "Because someday this war is going to end," Cade said. "And I'd rather it end with your people knowing what we are than with them only knowing what we can do to them. Cold your guns, corvette. My people are coming across." They brought 31 Sordan aboard the Grayling that day, wounded and frostbitten and stunned into silence, and the ship's medical officer, a sharp, exhausted young woman named Dr. Priya Anand, who had spent the morning expecting to treat her own dead, worked over alien bodies she had never studied and saved 28 of them, and swore and improvised, and did not let a single one die that she had the means to keep alive. And when the Sordan relief force arrived 2 days later, tense and expecting a trap, they found their people alive, warmed, treated and returned under a flag of truce by a patrol boat that then simply turned and left, torpedoes cold, having asked for nothing at all. The Sordan relief commander did not understand it. He reported it up the chain, because he did not know what else to do with it, and the report climbed, corvette to cruiser to vanguard to war council, until it reached the great vault beneath the carved god's throat, and Warlord Vorkal read it, and was silent for a very long time. "They spared them," said Lord Iskovar, who did not understand it either. "After we came to burn their colony, it is weakness, sentiment. We can use it, a people who will not finish their enemies can be." "Be silent," Vorkal said, and Iskovar was silent. The warlord rose and went to the map, and looked at the little smear of human worlds, and at the single mote that his intelligence had now, finally, attached a name to. The Grayling. Commanded by a Lieutenant Cade Merrow, human, 24 of their years old, which by the reckoning of the Sordan was barely more than a hatchling. "You think it is weakness," Vorkal said, "because you have never faced it. Listen to me, Iskovar, and understand what your reports are telling you, because it is the most dangerous thing I have read in 100 years. He turned. This human took 3 rowboats and destroyed 2 of our warships with patience and geometry, and the nerve to let our ships pass close enough to touch before he struck. That is skill. It is frightening, but it is only skill. Skill we can answer with numbers. But then, having beaten us, having every reason and every right to finish the survivors, he did not. He spent his own resources to save the lives of the enemy that had come to burn his home. That is my point. It is weakness." "It is restraint," the warlord said, and the word fell into the vault like a stone into a well. "It is a warrior who can kill you and chooses not to and wants you to know it was a choice. Do you understand what that means, Iskovar? A cruel enemy, we understand. A cruel enemy kills because it must, because it is afraid, because it is weak. You can predict a cruel enemy, you can frighten it. But an enemy that beats you and then spares you, that enemy is not afraid of you at all. It has so much power in reserve that it can afford to be merciful. Mercy from the weak is begging. Mercy from the strong is a message. And the message this human is sending to every one of our crews who hears the story is this: we can destroy you, and we choose the terms, and even your lives are a gift we decide whether to give." He looked at the mote of light. "That is not weakness. That is the most complete kind of victory there is. And it is spreading through my vanguard faster than any weapon, because a soldier can be ordered to face death. He cannot be ordered to stop wondering whether the enemy across from him is deciding, right now, whether to let him live." The vault was very quiet. "Find me a way to kill that ship," Vorkal said, quietly, cleanly, before the story grows any larger. "Because every day it lives, my soldiers look at the humans and see not rowboats, but a hand at their throat that has chosen, for now, not to close." But the story had already grown, and stories, unlike ships, cannot be killed by torpedoes. It grew through the frontier that winter as the war ground on, and it grew in 2 directions at once, which was the strange and terrible power of it. Among the humans, it grew as hope. The Grayling and her young captain became the proof that the Dominion could be faced, that the giant could be made to flinch, that skill and nerve could stand in for the guns they did not have. Ships that had been ready to flee held their positions because the Grayling held hers. Crews that had never met Cade Merrow fought a little harder because somewhere out on the line, a patrol boat was showing them how. And among the Sordan it grew as dread, not the clean fear of a superior weapon which a soldier can steel himself against, but the crawling, corrosive uncertainty of an enemy who did not behave the way an enemy was supposed to. The stories the crews traded in the dark were not of a monster. They were worse than that. They were of a mind. A patient, unhurried human mind that let you pass close enough to touch before it struck, that beat you with the ground under your feet and the dark behind your back, and that then, having beaten you, opened its airlock and saved your wounded and asked for nothing, so that you would carry the knowledge of your own smallness home with you and give it to everyone you met. By midwinter, Sordan crews on the fringe had a name for the Grayling. Translated into the human tongue, it came out roughly as the patient death, though a more careful translation, the one the intelligence analysts eventually settled on, rendered it closer to the one who lets you live. Cade Merrow did not know any of this. He knew that he was tired all the time, that he had lost 8 kilograms he could not afford, that he woke every few hours certain he had made a mistake that had killed someone, and that the war did not stop. He knew the names of every one of the 11 people aboard his ship, and the names of the dead from the 2 patrol boats he had lost, the Tallow, gone with all hands in a running fight near the Ember Belt. 4 of the Sable Wren's crew, killed when a Sordan raider caught them refueling. He carried those names the way he carried everything, quietly on the inside, where the crew could not see the weight. What he did not carry, what he had, without ever deciding to, simply set down somewhere in those long cold months, was the belief that he was too young, too ordinary, too middling a graduate to be the man the frontier needed. Somewhere between the shadow of the gas giant and the cometary belt and the drifting corvette full of dying enemies, Cade Merrow had stopped waiting for someone older and better to arrive and tell him what to do. There was no one older and better coming. There was only the line, and the ship, and the 11 and the war, and the choices that had to be made while nobody was watching. He made them, and the story grew. It reached its most dangerous point on a gray day near the end of winter, in the sector called the Merrow Drift, when the Grayling came upon a thing that would test the young captain's restraint far more brutally than any drifting corvette, and would, in the end, be the incident that turned Sordan dread into something closer to awe. There was one incident, in the deep cold of that midwinter, that the Sordan analysts would later mark as the moment the dread first curdled into something closer to superstition. The night the Grayling should not have survived, and did, and made it look, to the crews who lived to tell it, like a thing decided rather than a thing risked. It happened at the Ember Belt, a broad band of iron-rich asteroids that the Fringe's convoys threaded, because it was the only fuel-efficient road between the inner colonies and the mining stations at the line's far end. The Sordan had learned this, and had set a trap worthy of 9,000 years of practice. 3 raiders, a light cruiser and 2 corvettes, lying doused in the belt's iron shadow, waiting for the next convoy to enter the narrows where it could not turn and could not run. When the convoy came, 6 freighters and a single overmatched escort corvette, the Sable Wren, badly outnumbered, the trap closed, and the massacre began, and there was nothing the Sable Wren could do but die slowly in front of the ships it was meant to protect. The Grayling was 4 hours away when the distress call reached her, and 4 hours in that kind of fight was a lifetime too late. Cade Merrow did the arithmetic in his head the moment the call came in, and the arithmetic was merciless. Even burning past every safety limit, he would arrive to find 6 burning freighters and a dead corvette and 3 Sordan warships waiting, fat and warned, for a single patrol boat to throw itself onto their guns. Every rule he had, every instinct of self-preservation, said the convoy was already lost, and that flying to it was flying to a shared grave. He burned for it anyway, but he did not burn for it as a rescuer, he burned for it as a liar. "HFY," he said, on the long, terrible approach, "I need every spare transponder we've got, and I need you to make them lie for me. I want the Sable Wren's convoy to hear that a Terran battle group is inbound. 2 cruisers, 4 destroyers, the whole weight of the line. Broadcasted in the clear, encrypted just badly enough that the Sordan can crack it. I want them to intercept a distress relay saying help is 20 minutes out and coming in force." HFY understood at once, and his slow face broke into something that was almost a smile. "You want to sell them a fleet." "I want to sell them a fleet," Cade agreed. "The one thing that trap depends on is time. They need to finish the convoy and be gone before the line can react, because they know a real battle group would gut them. So I'm going to tell them the battle group's already coming. If they believe it, they don't have 20 minutes to burn 6 freighters at their leisure. They have to decide right now whether the kills are worth being caught in the open by a superior force." He was watching the plot, the belt growing on it, the fight already a scatter of dying transponders. A confident enemy takes its time. A worried one makes mistakes. I can't beat 3 warships, but I might be able to make them beat themselves. The lie went out into the dark, dressed in stolen fleet codes and just enough panic to sound real, and it reached the Sordan raiders exactly as Cade had gambled it would, as an intercepted human distress relay, frantic, unencrypted, begging a battle group to hurry. And the Sordan cruiser's commander, who had been methodically working his way through the convoy with the unhurried confidence of a predator at a kill, heard that a Terran battle group was 20 minutes out and coming in force, and felt the trap he had set turn, in an instant, into a trap he might be standing in. He did not run, not yet, but he stopped being patient. He ordered his corvettes to close and finish the freighters quickly, all guns, no finesse. And in doing so he pulled them out of the iron shadow that had hidden them, and strung them out across the narrows in a hurried firing line, focused entirely forward on the kills, their sterns and their sensor blind spots turned toward the deep belt behind them. Which was, of course, exactly where the Grayling came from. She arrived not on the convoy's bearing, where the Sordan expected relief to come, but from deep inside the belt itself, having spent the last 40 minutes of her approach threading the iron dark on a cold drive, running silent, using the very asteroids the Sordan had hidden in to hide herself. She came out behind the strung-out firing line at knife range. From the one direction 3 worried warships were no longer watching, and Cade Merrow put his torpedoes into the trailing corvette's drive before its crew even registered that the battle group they feared had turned out to be a single patrol boat that had walked in their own footprints to reach their backs. The corvette died. The cruiser wheeled, and now the fight was real and ugly and impossible. 1 patrol boat against a light cruiser and a corvette that had recovered from their surprise, and the Grayling should have died in the next 90 seconds. She did not, because Cade did not stay to fight. He had never intended to. He had come to break the timing of the trap, not to win a battle he could not win, and the instant the first corvette died he was already running, not away, but through, straight into the thickest, most tumbling heart of the belt, where a light cruiser could not follow at speed without gutting itself on the iron. And the Sordan commander, who now genuinely believed a battle group was minutes away, who had lost a ship to an enemy that had come out of empty rock behind him, who could not tell in the sensor-drowning clutter of the belt whether the patrol boat was alone or the screen of the fleet he had been warned about, made the only choice his fear left him. He broke off. He gathered his surviving corvette and he ran for open space, abandoning the kills, abandoning the trap, fleeing a battle group that did not exist, harried out of the narrows by a single patrol boat that had beaten 3 warships with a lie, a cold drive, and the nerve to walk in through their own back door. 5 of the 6 freighters survived. The Sable Wren survived, barely, venting and crippled but alive, its crew pulled from a fight they had already written themselves out of. And when Lieutenant Vasquez finally got her damaged sensors cleared enough to understand what had happened, that no battle group had come, that no cruisers or destroyers existed, that the entire relief had been one patched-up patrol boat, and a story her captain had told well enough to rout 3 warships, she sat in the ruin of her bridge and laughed until she wept. "There was no fleet," she said, over the link when she could speak. "Merrow, you rooted a raiding element with a fleet that doesn't exist." "There's always a fleet," Cade said quietly, watching the Sordan drive signatures dwindle into the dark. "It just isn't always made of ships. Sometimes it's just what the other side is afraid you might have. That's most of what a warship is, Vasquez. It's the fear it makes in the mind across from it. Ours are small, so we have to make the fear do the rest." He was silent a moment, looking at the 5 saved freighters and the one that had not been saved. "Get your wounded to us. Annen's standing by." The account of the Ember Belt spread through the fringe faster than any of the earlier stories, and it spread through the Sordan faster still, and it changed in the telling, into something the analysts found genuinely alarming. Because the crews who had fled the belt could not admit, even to themselves, that they had been routed by a single patrol boat and a bluff. So they told it differently. They told it as an ambush by a hidden human force, a trap sprung from the Iron Dark by an enemy who had known exactly where they hid and exactly when they would break formation, who had appeared behind them out of solid rock and vanished back into it, who had turned their own trap inside out as though he had read their plans from the beginning. The story grew a supernatural edge it had not started with, the sense of a human who did not merely fight the Sordan but understood them, who could stand in the dark and know precisely what a Sordan commander would fear and when he would fear it, and who used that knowledge the way other captains used guns. And that, the analysts wrote in the report that eventually climbed to the Great Vault, was the more dangerous thing by far. A ship could be outbuilt, a tactic could be outthought, but a Sordan crew that had come to believe the enemy could read their fear from across the dark did not fight like a crew that outnumbered its enemy 3-1. It fought like prey. It broke formation early, it flinched at shadows in the clutter, it fled from battle groups that did not exist, because somewhere in the back of every soldier's mind was the story of the Ember Belt, and the certain knowledge that, when you set a trap for the humans, you could no longer be sure who was the trapper and who was the trapped. Cade Merrow, for his part, remembered the Ember Belt mostly as the night he had failed to save one freighter, and as the moment he first understood, with a clarity that frightened him, how much of the war was being fought inside the enemy's head rather than across the dark between the ships. He had not fired a shot that could have destroyed the cruiser. He had barely fired at all. And he had routed 3 warships and saved a convoy, and the difference between that night and a shared grave had been a lie told well, a cold drive, and the nerve to walk in through a door the enemy was certain no one would use. He was learning, slowly, the shape of the thing his crew and his enemy had both begun to call the patient death, and he did not much like it, because it was built out of other people's fear, and fear was a poor and dangerous thing to build a legend on. But the war did not care what he liked. It only cared what worked. And what worked, again and again, was patience where the enemy expected panic, and stillness where the enemy expected flight, and mercy where the enemy expected the killing blow, the steady, unhurried refusal of a young man to become the thing that was trying to make him afraid. The story grew. And in the great vault beneath the carved throat of the conquered god, the warlord of the Sordan Dominion read the report of the Ember Belt, and added it to the report of the drifting corvette, and knew, with the cold certainty of a thing that has ruled for 9,000 years, and has finally seen its ending sketched in the dark, that the story would have to be answered by more than ships. The Merrow Drift was a graveyard of a place even before the war, a slow eddy of dead comets and shattered planetoids where the fringe's shipping lanes had never quite dared to run. The Grayling patrolled it because someone had to, and because Cade had learned that the Sordan favored exactly such places, the dead, cluttered corners where sensors drowned and ambushes bred. He was watching for a raider when the distress beacon found him instead. It was a human beacon. It was coming from the colony at Senar's Rock, a mining settlement of 900 souls on a lonely rock at the drift's far edge, and by the time the Grayling reached it, running her old drive past every safety limit Sela Wren dared, there was nothing left to save. The Sordan had come in the night. They had not come to conquer Senar's Rock, or to take it, or to demand its tribute. They had come to make an example, on the direct order of a vanguard sublord who had grown tired of hearing that the humans could be spared, that they could be reasoned with, that they were anything other than vermin to be cleansed. They had cracked the colony's dome from orbit and let the cold and the dark do the rest, and they had left the wreckage burning as a message, and the message was, "This is what your mercy earns you. This is what the strong do to the weak. Learn it." The Grayling drifted over the ruin of Senar's Rock in a silence that no one aboard had words for. Dr. Annan went down with a recovery team and came back gray-faced and did not speak for the rest of the day. They found no survivors. They found 900 reasons for a young captain to decide, finally, that restraint was a luxury the war could no longer afford. And they found, 6 hours later, drifting powerless in the deep clutter of the drift where it had suffered a drive failure during its withdrawal, the ship that had done it. Or rather, they found a Sordan transport, and the plot could not immediately tell them which one it was. It was slow, unarmed, its drive dead, running on emergency power, packed with life signs. It might have been the ship that had murdered Senar's Rock. It might have been a supply hauler that had never fired a shot. From its transponder, once Akafar cracked it, it was neither and both. It was a personnel transport, and it carried the withdrawing crews of the raid, wounded and unwounded alike. And it also carried in its aft compartments over 200 Sordan civilians, families of the Vanguard Support Corps, being evacuated from a forward base the humans had threatened. Soldiers who had helped murder 900 people. And 200 civilians who had done nothing but be born into the wrong empire, on the same helpless, drifting ship, with the Grayling's torpedo tubes loaded and hot, and a range so short that not one of them would survive. The bridge was very, very quiet. "We have a firing solution," Akafar said. His voice was flat and careful, and Cade understood that the older man was not recommending anything, was, in fact, deliberately recommending nothing and leaving the whole terrible weight of it exactly where it belonged, on the young shoulders that had chosen to carry the ship. "One salvo. They can't move and they can't shoot back. It's the ship that did Senar's Rock, Lieutenant, or it's carrying the ones who did. Your call." Sela Wren had turned from the helm. Her knuckles were white. She was 19 and she had walked the recovery footage of the colony, and there were tears standing in her eyes and something harder behind them. "They cracked the dome," she said. Her voice shook. 900 people, children. They did it to send us a message, sir. So send one back. For once, just send one back. Every eye on the bridge was on him. Cade Merrow stood in the center of the deck, and he could feel the pull of it, the deep, hot human wanting of it. The 200 civilians a price he could tell himself the war made necessary, the murderers a debt the dead were owed. It would have been so easy. It would have felt, for one clean, burning second, like justice, and no one would ever have blamed him. Command would have called it a legitimate strike on a withdrawing enemy troop transport. The dead of Senar's Rock cried out for it. His own crew wanted it. He wanted it. He looked at the drifting ship for a long time. "No," he said. The word landed on the bridge like a physical thing. Sela made a small, broken sound. "Sir." "Listen to me." Cade's voice was not loud. It never was at the moments that mattered. "Listen, because I'm only going to explain this once, and then I need you to fly this ship. There are 200 people on that transport who never fired a shot. Families. The same as the families on Senar's Rock. And there are soldiers on it who did something so far past forgiving that I don't have the words. And I cannot kill the second without killing the first. That's the choice. That's the only choice on the table. It isn't justice for Senar's Rock. Justice for Senar's Rock died with Senar's Rock. This is just 200 more coffins, and I would be lying to you and to myself if I called it anything else." "They wouldn't spare us," Sela whispered. "I know," he said it gently. "I know they wouldn't. And that's, Sela, look at me, that is the entire reason we do. The moment we do to them what they did to us, there is no difference between us anymore. There is just two peoples burning each other's children forever, and whoever runs out of children last calls it winning. I will not fly a ship that does that, not while I command it. We are not going to become the thing we're fighting because the thing we're fighting made it easy." He turned to the pickup, and his voice steadied into the flat, unhurried tone that his crew knew now meant that the frightened young man had, once again, decided not to be afraid. "Open a channel to the transport." It took a long time to answer. When it did, the voice was not a soldier's. It was thin and old and terrified, a civilian's voice, an administrator or an elder, someone unused to speaking to warships. Human ship, we are without weapons, without drive, we carry families. Our soldiers are aboard, yes, and we know what they have done, and we know you have come from Senar's Rock, and the voice broke and gathered itself, and went on with a dignity that cost it visibly, we ask nothing. We have no right to ask. We only tell you the truth so that whatever you do it knowing. I know what your soldiers did, Cade said. I've been walking through it all day. I'm going to tell you what's going to happen now, and you're going to listen carefully. I am not going to fire on this ship. I am going to transmit your position and your drive fault to the nearest Sordan relief element so they can come and take you home. And your soldiers, the ones who cracked the dome at Senar's Rock, you're going to carry them home too. Alive. And every day for the rest of their lives they are going to know that the people they murdered had a ship that could have ended them in a breath and chose not to. That's their sentence. Living, knowing, carrying it. He paused. That's the message I'm sending back, Sela. Not 200 coffins, that. He closed the channel. The bridge was silent. And then Ensign Sela Wren, 19 years old, wiped her face with the back of her hand, and turned back to her console and flew the ship, because her captain had asked her to, and because somewhere in the last 2 minutes she had understood, in a way she would spend years trying to put into words, that she had just watched the hardest thing she had ever seen a person do, and that it had been done not out of weakness but out of a strength she did not yet know how to hold. The Grayling relayed the transport's position to the Sordan and withdrew from the Merrow drift, and did not fire a shot, and carried its 900 dead in silence into the dark. The story of it reached the Sordan before their relief ships even arrived. The transport, once its drive was restored, broadcast the account across every Vanguard channel, unencrypted, because the old administrator who had spoken to Cade Merrow had decided the entire Dominion needed to hear it. And it landed among the Sordan crews of the Fringe with a force that no atrocity could have matched, because they had just seen, in the mirror the humans held up, exactly what they themselves were. The sublord who had ordered the murder of Senar's Rock had believed he was teaching the humans a lesson about strength. Instead, he had taught his own people one. His soldiers had murdered 900 helpless colonists to prove the humans were weak. And a human patrol boat had held 200 of his people, and the murderers among them at point-blank range, and let them live. The contrast was unbearable. It could not be spun. Every Sordan crew on the line did the arithmetic, and every crew arrived at the same intolerable answer. The humans were not the weak ones in this war. The Dominion had cracked a dome full of children to feel strong. The humans had spared a ship full of the guilty because they could afford to. Which of those, a soldier lying awake in the dark could not help but ask, was the act of the greater power? When the account reached the Great Vault, Warlord Vorkal did not read it aloud. He read it alone, 3 times, and then he sat for a long while beneath the carved throat of the conquered god, and thought about 9,000 years of conquest, and about a 24-year-old human who had done, in a drifting graveyard, the one thing the Dominion in all its long history had forgotten was possible. Then he summoned the sublord who had ordered Senar's Rock, and he stripped him of his command and his rank and his name in front of the entire war council. Not because the atrocity had been cruel. The Dominion did not punish cruelty. He stripped him because the atrocity had been a defeat, because it had handed the humans the moral high ground on a plate, had proven to every Sordan soldier that the enemy they faced was not merely more skilled and more patient than they were, but somehow, impossibly, larger of spirit. And that, Vorkal understood, was a wound that no fleet could close. The story must end, he told the council, and there was something in the old warlord's voice that had never been there before, a thing the younger lords did not recognize because none of them had ever heard the warlord afraid. Not the ship, the story. As long as that patrol boat lives, every human vessel my soldiers meet becomes, in their minds, the Grayling. Every small ship might be the one that lets them pass close enough to touch. Every mercy might be a message about power they do not have. My vanguard is beginning to fight the humans the way prey fights a predator, carefully from a distance, hoping not to be noticed. That is not how the Sordan Dominion makes war. That is how the Sordan Dominion is ended. He rose. I will not send another vanguard. I will not send numbers. Numbers are what the human has taught my soldiers to fear, because he keeps beating them with fewer. I will send the one thing the story cannot survive. He looked at the map, at the little mote of light that had grown in 6 months to fill the whole vault with its shadow. I will send the Aeon's Edge. And I will send Champion Drath. The Aeon's Edge was not a warship in the sense the Grayling was a warship. It was a statement given a hull. It was long and pale and built for a single purpose, which was to find one enemy and end it, and it carried the personal banner of Champion Drath, who in 9 centuries of service had never lost a single ship engagement and had killed more captains, of more species, than any living Sordan. Drath was not a war council lord. He did not scheme. He was a blade the Dominion kept sheathed for the rare enemy that could not be answered with numbers, and Vorkal had unsheathed him exactly once before in 100 years. Drath understood his task perfectly. He was not being sent to win the war. He was being sent to kill a story. And Drath knew, as the schemers on the War Council did not, that a story like the one that surrounded the Grayling could not be killed by simply destroying the ship in a nameless corner of the dark. If the Grayling vanished, she would become a martyr, and a martyr's story outlives any warship. No. To kill the story, Drath had to beat the human at his own game in the open, where all the fringe could see it, and prove that the patience and the nerve and the mercy were not strength at all, but a trick that a real warrior could see through and break. He had to make the humans watch their legend lose. So Champion Drath did not hunt the Grayling. He announced himself. He brought the Aeon's Edge to the edge of the Halcyon system, where the story had begun, and he broadcast a challenge on every human frequency, in the clear, in a voice like grinding glass. He named Cade Merrow and named the Grayling, and declared that he would hold position for 3 of the humans' days, and that if the patient death did not come to face him, ship to ship alone, then he would begin burning the colonies of the fringe one by one in order, starting with Halcyon's Reach, until the coward came out of the dark. He would give the humans, he said, the choice their own legend had taught the Dominion to fear. Come and face me, or let me murder your worlds while you calculate the odds. It was, Cade understood the moment he heard it, a very good trap. Drath had built it out of the Grayling's own reputation. If Cade did not come, the story died, the patient death revealed as a fraud who let colonies burn to save his own hull. If he came, he faced a ship and a warrior built for the sole purpose of killing him, alone, with no belt to hide in and no darkness to strike from in the open on Drath's terms. Either way, the legend ended. That was the whole design. You're not seriously considering it, said Vasquez over the link from the Sable Wren. The frontier fleets were close now, weeks of convergence finally paying off. There were real warships within a day's burn of Halcyon at last. Merrow, we can bring 6 ships to Halcyon inside 20 hours. Cruisers, real ones. We don't have to play his game. We can meet him with a fleet. And the moment a fleet jumps in, Cade said, he burns Halcyon's Reach in the 10 minutes before you arrive, and then he dies having proven that the only way to beat him was numbers, that the story was always a lie, that the humans only ever win when they outnumber you. He was looking at the plot, at the pale ship holding station at the edge of the system, and the old cold clarity was settling over him, the problem turning and turning. That's what he wants, Vasquez. He wants to die honestly more than he wants to live. He's not here to win the war. He's here to make sure that, when the histories are written, the last thing anyone remembers about the Grayling is that she needed a fleet to do what she claimed she could do alone. So what, you go out there and let him kill you to protect a reputation? That's insane. No, Cade chewed the inside of his cheek. I go out there because he's given me something he doesn't know he's given me. He's told me exactly where he'll be and for how long, and that he'll fight fair. A warrior who has never lost, who's certain he can't lose, who's promised in front of the whole fringe to fight one ship alone in the open. He looked up, and there was something in his tired young face that made Vasquez go quiet on the other end of the link. He's built the whole trap around the idea that he understands me, that the patience and the mercy are a trick, and that a real warrior can see through them. So I'm going to give him exactly the fight he asked for, ship to ship, in the open, alone, a pause. And I'm going to beat him with the two things he's certain are weakness, patience, and mercy, because he spent 9 centuries winning, Vasquez, and a man who's never lost has never once had to think about what he'd do if he did. He would not let the fleet come. He asked one thing of them only, to hold their position out of sensor range and to watch and to record everything and to broadcast it, because if this worked, the whole fringe needed to see it, and if it did not, then the truth of how the Grayling died was worth more than any comforting lie. Then Lieutenant Cade Merrow took his patched, rewelded 19-year-old patrol boat and 11 volunteers, who would not have let him go alone if he had ordered it, and burned for the edge of the Halcyon system, to meet a warrior who had never lost, in a ship that could kill him in a single pass. The Ian's Edge saw him coming from a long way off, and Champion Drath felt, for the first time in centuries, a flicker of something that was almost joy. The human had come. The trap had held. Now there was only the fight, and the fight, Drath had no doubt at all, would go the way every fight in his long life had gone. They closed at a combined speed that turned the approach into a matter of minutes. Drath had expected tricks, expected the human to try to run, to draw him into clutter, to fight the way the stories said he fought, from the dark and the flank. He had planned for all of it. What he had not planned for was that the Grayling came straight in, drive hot, utterly exposed on a direct closing line, as though the little ship intended to meet the Ian's Edge head-to-head in the open like an equal. It was, Drath thought, either madness or a bluff, and he had built his life on seeing through bluffs. He opened fire at extreme range to break it. And the Grayling did not flinch, and did not run, and did not die, because Cade Merrow had spent 6 months learning the one thing about the Sordan that all his patients had taught him, which was how they aimed. Sordan fire control, calibrated over 9,000 years of overwhelming enemies with volume, always let its target on the assumption that the target would try to evade. It fired not where the enemy was, but where the enemy would flee to. And so Cade did the one thing 9 centuries of Drath's opponents had never done. He did not flee. He held his line, dead straight, into the teeth of the guns, and the Sordan fire control led him beautifully, precisely, into the empty space where a sane captain would have dodged. And the volley went wide, every bolt of it, tearing through the vacuum a kilometer off the Grayling's unwavering bow. Drath adjusted and fired again, and again the human held straight, and again the fire control led him into a dodge he did not make. Twice, 3 times, and Champion Drath, for the first time in his long life, felt the cold touch of an enemy who was doing something he did not understand, who was winning, impossibly, not by being faster or stronger, but by being still. By having the nerve to fly straight into fire on the exact calculation that the fear the Sordan counted on was a fear he had decided, coldly, not to feel. The range closed, and now they were near, close enough that even Drath's fire control could not lead a straight-line target into a miss, close enough that the next volley would not go wide, and that was the moment Cade had flown the whole suicidal approach to reach. Because a warrior who has never lost does not expect the prey to want to be close. And at knife range, in the one instant before Drath's guns could correct, the Grayling did the thing she had been built for, and the Ian's Edge had not. She was small, and she was quick, and she rolled inside the great ship's turning arc, under the sweep of the main batteries, into the blind cone along the Ian's Edge's flank where a ship built to kill at range could not bring a single heavy gun to bear. And there, from a range of less than 400 meters, Cade Merrow put every torpedo the Grayling carried into the Ian's Edge's drive cluster, and did not miss. The great pale ship shuddered and went dark, and its drive died, and it began to drift powerless, blind on one flank, its main guns pointed at empty space in the open in front of the recording sensors of 6 human warships and the whole watching fringe. Beaten by a patrol boat, in single combat in the open, on the champion's own terms, in less than 9 minutes. Champion Drath sat in the ruin of his certainty and waited to die. It was, he thought, a good death. He had lost to a worthy enemy honestly, and the human had every right to finish him, and would, because that was what a warrior did, that was what Drath himself would have done. That was the one part of the story that had to be true, that the mercy was a trick and the human was, underneath, a killer like any other. He waited for the final salvo. He almost welcomed it. It did not come. Instead, the channel opened and the human's voice came through, and it was young and tired and utterly without triumph. Champion Drath, this is Cade Merrow. Your drive's gone and your guns can't reach me. I've got a solution on your reactor and nothing left to stop me from taking it. A pause. And I'm not going to. Drath went very still. You came here to prove the mercy was a trick, Cade said. That underneath it I'm just a killer and that a real warrior could see through it. So I need you to understand exactly what's happening right now because you're going to carry it home. I beat you. In the open. Alone. On the terms you chose. And now I'm going to let you live, not because I have to, not because I'm weak, but because I can. Because I have your reactor locked and I'm choosing right now while you watch not to take it. That's not a trick, champion. That's the answer to the question you came all this way to ask. His voice did not rise. You wanted to show the fringe that we only win with numbers, that the patience and the mercy are lies. So here's the truth recorded for every ship in the Dominion to see. 1 patrol boat. 1 warrior who has never lost. And I beat you with patience, and I'm sparing you with strength, and the only thing you have left to take home is the knowledge that you were right about one thing. A real warrior can see through the mercy. He can see straight through it to what's underneath. And what's underneath isn't weakness, Drath. It's a people so far past needing to prove anything to you that we can afford to let even you live. Go home. Tell them what beat you. Tell them all of it. And Champion Drath, who had never lost, who had come to kill a story, drifted powerless in the open with his life in the hands of a 24-year-old human who had chosen to give it back, and understood, with a clarity that felt like the ground opening beneath 9,000 years of empire, that the story could not be killed because the story was true. The Sordan relief force reached the Aeon's edge 11 hours later and towed their broken champion home. Drath made his report to the War Council in person, standing beneath the carved throat of the conquered god, and he did not spin it, and he did not soften it, because he was a warrior and the truth was the only thing he had left to carry. He told them he had been beaten in the open, alone on his own terms, by a single patrol boat in 9 minutes, and he told them he had been spared. And he told them what the human had said, all of it, and when he had finished, the great vault of the Sordan Dominion was more silent than it had been in 9,000 years. Warlord Vorkal listened to all of it. And then the old warlord, who had once touched the smallest mote on the map and called it a rowboat crewed by children, sat for a long time in the silence and looked at the map of the fringe, where the human sphere no longer seemed small. "Recall the 9th Vanguard," he said at last. Lord Iskavar started. "Warlord, the offensive, 1 ship, 1 defeat, it does not." "It is not 1 ship," Vorkal said, and his voice was very quiet and very old, and for the first time in the memory of anyone in that vault, it held no certainty at all, only the hard, clean respect of a thing that has finally met its equal and had the wisdom to know it. "It has never been 1 ship. Look at what my soldiers see now, when they meet a human vessel in the dark. They do not see a patrol boat or a cutter or a freighter. They see the Grayling. They see the ship that lets you come close enough to touch and then takes your engines. They see the ship that beats you and spares you so that you carry your smallness home. Every human hull on that map is now, in the mind of every soldier I command, the patient death, because they have learned that the size of the ship tells them nothing about the size of what is inside it. He turned from the map. We came to teach the humans to fear the dark. Instead, we have taught my entire dominion to fear every small ship in it. There is no victory at the end of that road, Iskavar. There is only a long war against an enemy that has already beaten us in the one place wars are truly won. In the moment before the trigger, when my soldier looks across the dark at a human ship, and hesitates because he does not know, he cannot ever know, whether the small thing in front of him is deciding, right now, whether to let him live. He gave the order, and the 9th Vanguard withdrew from the fringe, and the war that was to have ended before the humans knew it had begun instead ended, because a Dominion 9,000 years old had learned, from a single patrol boat, the one lesson its long conquest had never taught it, that there are enemies whose strength cannot be measured by the guns they carry, and that the most dangerous thing in all the dark is a small ship crewed by people who have decided, quietly, that they are not afraid. Cade Merrow was promoted, eventually, though he never quite got used to the way rooms went silent when he entered them. He kept the Grayling. He kept the 11. He kept the names of the dead on the inside where the weight belonged. And for the rest of the long peace that followed, when a Sordan captain met a human ship in the deep black of the fringe, any human ship, a cutter or a hauler or a patched old patrol boat, that captain would run the arithmetic the young human had taught the whole Dominion to run, and would hold his fire, and would let the small ship pass, and would carry home, one more time, the knowledge that had beaten an empire. You never know which one is the Grayling. You never know which small, quiet thing in the dark has already decided your life is a gift it will choose whether to give, and so you treat them all as though they have. Which is another way of saying that a single patrol boat, crewed by 11 people and commanded by a young man of no particular distinction, made the Sordan Dominion afraid of every human ship they ever encountered again. Not because of what one small ship had done, but because of what it had proven any small ship could be.